Hello, and welcome to another fabulous Love Reading for Kids event. My name's Joy Court. I'm one of the Love Reading team of reviewers, and I'm really excited to be joined today by two fabulous reading ambassadors, Eve and Annie from Northampton. And we're all so excited about talking to Julia Green today about her wonderful new book to be published by David Fickling Books on June the 6th. Ettie and the Midnight Pool is a mysterious, evocative coming-of-age story which literally explores hidden depths and reveals family secrets. Julia is the Emeritus Professor of Writing for Young People at Bath Spa University, and until 2019 was course director for the MA in Writing for Young People. So Julia knows everything about writing for children and young people. And so she's launched the careers of many successful children's writers, but she's written over 20 novels and stories herself for children and young adults. Now, I know Eve and Annie have some great questions lined up, but before we start, I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about our reading ambassadors. Eve is 11 and she's a total bookworm. Her favourite types of books are fantasy novels, but she likes trying out new topics. When she's not reading, Eve loves drawing, and she's often inspired by her reading to write her own stories and loves going to drama group. Annie is Eve's younger sister and is 8 years old and is following in her footsteps of being a bookworm. She loves graphic novels and really enjoys historical non-fiction books too. Annie looks after her classroom book corner and Eve is a school librarian. Eve and Annie both love playing netball when they're not reading. Right, so over to you then for your questions.
So our first question is, did you read any books that inspired you to write Ettie and the Midnight Pool? Or where did the ideas come from?
That's a great question. Thank you. Well, there's not one particular book that inspired the writing of Etty and the Midnight Pool, but I think every single thing I've ever read has probably fed into my writing of the story. And all the books I loved as a child, including books like Tom's Midnight Garden, and I loved the Laura Ingalls Wilder books there. I loved adventures of children outside in the natural world, exploring and finding things, and also books with a bit of a mystery in them. So sometimes books that kind of, you're not quite sure if something really happening or am I imagining it happening? So I love books that cross the boundaries. And maybe Etty and the Midnight Pool is a bit like that. So there's lots of secrets and mysteries in the story and things that you're not sure, are they real? Is it really happening like this? So books that make you ask questions as a reader. But it's particularly inspired, this particular book, by my time I spent in a place in the northwest of England called the Lake District. It's a very beautiful place with high mountains and woodlands and streams and beautiful lakes and tarns where I like to swim, but also a place that's got an industrial past. So there used to be slate quarries, slate mines and tunnels and caves and rather dangerous places where you might fall into a tunnel by mistake. So finding out about those things made me start thinking about that as a place to begin a story. And I love to write stories where I sort of want to be in that place. And so it's sort of almost as if I'm writing, although I'm in my office at my desk, I say at office, my room, which is my writing room. When I'm writing the story, I'm in the place where I'm writing about, so I can spend lots of time in the Lake District.
Is the story of Etty based on your own childhood? And did you have a friend like Cora?
Oh, lovely question. No, I didn't have a friend like Cora. Who led me into doing very dangerous things. I did have a very good friend called Linda, and Linda and I, on Sunday mornings, we used to get up very early before our mums and dads were up, and we used to go for a walk in the woods that are nearby. She was a year older than me, and we were allowed to go out all by ourselves. Sometimes we took our dog with us, my dog. and we'd walk. We built a den, and we had all sorts of adventures in the woods. So we did sort of exploring things like that, and it was very exciting. And I loved the den we made in the oak woods, sort of leant against an old oak tree. And then there was a very sad moment when we came to one Sunday morning and found that there'd been a storm, and lightning had struck the tree and burnt the tree and burned up our den. So our den wasn't there anymore. But we were so lucky we weren't there at the time. But that was a scary thing. So yeah, so I didn't have a friend like Cora. But I did have a friend who was sort of adventurous like me and liked the same sorts of things that I did, like being outside. Yeah.
It's amazing looking back, isn't it, when you think of the freedom we had as children, because I grew up in rural Norfolk and would do the same thing, be out all day in the woods and fields, and that sort of freedom sounds remarkable. I expect you to now.
Yeah, we lived in a village, and it wasn't far to walk to these places, but my parents I had sisters as well, and we used to go out by ourselves. And I think having the dog with us, we had a lovely dog, kind of made us feel safer taking her with us.
So I think this has sort of been answered, but is this book set in the Lake District, and if so, why?
That's a great question, and I sort of answered it already, haven't I? But it is set in the Lake District, yes. But it's like it's a real place, but I sort of change things around a bit to make it suit my story. So you could go to a place called Fletcher's Wood, which is mentioned in my novel, and you could walk through those woods, but it wouldn't be quite the same as it is in my story. And yes, so it is a real place. It is the Lake District because I love it. Yeah, it's one of the places I love. I love lots of places. Some of my stories have been set in islands, in Scotland and Cornwall. So the places that I love, yeah.
Do you know the Lake District, girls?
Yes.
Oh, do you? Where have you been? Tell me where you've been.
Well, I've climbed 8 Wainwrights so far.
Wow, that's amazing. God, well done you.
And our granddad has climbed all 214.
Really? My goodness. Does he live there? Does he live
We're
in
all quite the fans.
You really are, aren't you? Oh my goodness, that's a wonderful thing to do. Well done you.
Why did you include the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice in the book? Does this story mean something to you?
I love that question. It does mean something to me. I think it's an amazing story. I think all the Greek myths are amazing, and the fact that they've lasted so long and still mean something to us today. It's a story about love and about loss and about death and the kind of almost universal desire that somebody we love that's died, that we want to bring them back again. And the story is that we can't. And that's what we had to come to terms with. So it sort of resonates with me at that level. But I also needed a story that would work, because Grandma's telling stories all the time to Ettie, and I needed a story that somehow would mean something to Ettie as well. And of course, in my book, Grandma changes the ending. So she tells the story, but she doesn't tell the real ending. Because she wants to protect Ettie. But Ettie's growing up, she's desperate to, to sort of stretch her wings and explore further and go deeper and find out the truth about things. So Grandma has to learn that about Ettie and about Ettie's need to know the truth, to know the real endings.
Yes, that's something adults are guilty of, isn't it? Patronising children.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to respect them.
So the next question is, one character in the story is a dog, Red, and are you a cat or dog person? And what is your favourite animal?
I love that question too. Well, I like both dogs and cats. I have always had cats. And I've got a very old cat now. He's 16, nearly 17, a tabby cat, and so he's probably my favourite animal at the moment. But we had a dog when we were growing up. So we had a lovely Labrador, and her name was Lisa, and then we had another Labrador called Meg. So dogs were sort of part of my life growing up, and I'm very pleased about that. But I don't have a dog now. But I've always, yes, I love cats and dogs. What about you? Do you love dogs or cats? Or both?
Cats.
Cats.
Yeah, we're both cat people.
Yeah, cats are something very special about them. I like their independence, the fact that they can have their own lives and do
And
their
their
own thing.
expressions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My cat's very chatty. He talks a lot, so he's always making sounds. I had to shut up my door because I thought he might come in and join in our conversation.
I was just about to say that it's surprising how many authors have cats. You
Yes.
often want to join in the conversations. Yeah. There's
How
something about a cat, I think, which helps the writing process. That's a conclusion I've come to over the year.
They're very lovely presents, aren't they?
Yes.
How did you come up with Ettie's chicken names? Do you have chickens yourself? And if so, are they the same names?
They're not the same names. I haven't got chickens now because I don't have that kind of a garden anymore since I moved. But when I lived in a house in Bath, we had a very long garden and we had 4 chickens. But the names for the chickens in the book in Ettie, I had real fun with them. So 2 of them are names of my grandmas. So Olive and Winnie are names of my 2 grandmas. And then the other names, well, Lisa, I was a nod to my wonderful editor at David Fickling, Liz. But I put an A on the end because the sort of sounds of the words in the sentence had to be right. And what was the other name? But what's the 4th chicken? I'm trying to think. Oh, I've got Ruby and then Pam. And Pam is the illustrator in my book. Wonderful Pam Smythe, whose drawings, illustrations in the book are just fabulous. So I just had fun. And Ruby, I just love the name Ruby, but yeah. Have you got chickens? Have you had chickens ever?
No.
No. I love the sounds chickens make. They're really, really,
Yeah, they're really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is Cora based on a real person? And if not, how did you come up with her personality?
That's a very good question. She's not based on a real person. And all through the book, I want the reader to be asking questions about Cora. Is she a real person? She's very real to Ettie.
Yeah.
But there's a sort of strangeness about her, and that sort of came when I was writing. So I didn't plan Cora. I was as surprised as Ettie, really, to find her walking up through the woods. And so I had to stop when I'm writing a book, I've always got a notebook. So I had to open my big notebook and start thinking, well, who is Cora? And I started writing some things down about her. But I found her very mysterious. And then I realized she needed to be like that. She's as part of the story so that we go on asking questions about her. Ettie sees her, but there are questions about, the fact that nobody else sees Cora. Ettie's the only one. So I think in the reader's mind, you start thinking, well, who is this? Is this somebody?
Yeah.
Is she ghost? Like, I don't know what you thought about Cora. How did you think about her?
She's definitely very mysterious, and you can't really tell what she's thinking. I think she might like Ettie, but all through the story it sort of changes as well.
Yeah. So there's something a bit frightening about her, isn't there? And Cora becomes a bit more frightening as we go along. And she sort of starts encouraging Ettie to do some really dangerous things. And she doesn't seem to be the friend that Ettie really wants. A friend, you could imagine, she's all by herself living in the countryside with her grandma, and she really, really wants a friend. But it seems Cora isn't really the sort of friend she should have. Yeah.
We are left with
What you said. Oh, sorry, Annie.
We are left with lots of unanswered questions about Cora. Was this deliberate, and will there be another book that might give us more detail about her life?
Well, there's not going to be another book about her. Yes, it is very deliberate that you ask questions about Cora, and that Cora seems to shift and change. And there's sort of question marks about whether she's actually there, or was she there, or is she a sort of product of Ettie's own imagining? And so I want to leave those things ambiguous or open to interpretation. And I sort of try and set that up at the beginning by what Grandma says. Do you remember what Grandma says at the beginning to Ettie? She says, she talks about the in-between times, between at dusk and at dawn, when the light is shifting and we might see things that we're not expecting to see. So that's the sort of atmosphere I wanted to create right from the beginning, and because the world has changed and there's a kind of deep quiet, animals are coming back, but maybe there's other things that some people, special people like Ettie, are able to see.
Yeah.
Very deliberate.
I mean, what you said when you were telling us about you were as surprised as Ettie when you saw Cora climbing up that hill. So from that, I gather you're not a big planner in terms of your writing style, because some authors have very detailed plans of the story before they actually start to write. Are you someone more like Philip Pullman, who lets the pencil take him for a walk?
Much more like that. So yes, a sort of more organic process. So I have my notebooks and I start off the notebook and I scribble things down and I know bits and pieces. I knew the setting and I knew quite a lot about the sort of story I wanted to write. I sort of quite quickly knew about Ettie and Grandma, and they were quite clear to me in my mind. And then as I begin to write in the notebook, or even when I'm typing, new things come and then I follow them and see where they go. And sometimes they're mistakes and I have to kind of go all the way back and undo that thread. So this book, I wrote so many versions of it. So I did lots and lots of drafts. And that's the danger, I suppose. If you don't plan, then you have to keep making changes to make the story work. However, it also means you're constantly being surprised and excited. And I think it's also a way that you can let the unconscious mind out onto the page. And I think that's how you get new and original stories, actually, by listening to that voice which sort of knows more than I know. It's not conscious, but I think you get a deeper, more layered story that way.
Sort of covered this at the beginning, but what was your favourite book as a child?
I had so many. I was thinking about this question and I was thinking, well, I read all the time. I loved books, and at different ages I would have different favourites. But the favourites that really stayed with me are, I loved Tom's Midnight Garden by Philippa Pearce. That's the kind of book that I just think it's so beautifully done. And although some aspects of it are a bit old fashioned now, there's still something totally magical about that story. I don't know if you know the story, but anyway, I really recommend you read it. I love The Borrowers. There's a book called The Borrowers, and I really loved. There's a whole series of books by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and the first one, Little House in the Big Woods, and then there's a whole series, and it's Laura's growing up and having adventures, and her family. All of it was so real to me. And I've got all of those books still. And my father used to buy the new hardback as they came out, and they were beautifully illustrated by Garth Williams. Everything about the book, the smell, the look, all of it I loved, and they were important books to me. I felt that I was Laura in those stories, partly because I had an older sister like Laura does and a younger sister. And the family is very important, and being outside and learning new things, everything about them was just wonderful. Yeah.
Lovely answer.
Yeah.
Have you read any of those books, girls?
I think I might have heard of some. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You haven't read Tom's Midnight Garden or anything?
No.
I think we might have covered a little section of it, maybe in an English lesson, but I haven't read it fully yet.
Yeah, do read it. It's wonderful, really wonderful story.
Yeah, it sounds really nice. Do you have any interesting hobbies?
I like to swim, and I like to swim in outside places, not in swimming pools. So I like to swim in the Lake District, in the tarns, the lakes. Very cold, but absolutely beautiful. So last year when we were there in the Lake District, I think there were 3 different lakes that we swam in, and it was utterly beautiful. And now I live at the coast, at the northeast coast. I swim in the sea, but it's the North Sea, and the North Sea is very, very cold. So, but I try and do it when I can. Yeah, and I love to walk, and I love to garden. and I love to read. Those are my main things that I do. And watch films, yeah, and theatre.
I think your love for nature really comes through in the writing. I don't know if you agree with me, girls, but I mean the descriptive paragraphs about the landscape and the settings, and you can just visualize it all as you're reading, can't you? Absolutely beautiful. So the outside world is something that's nature, and the how we relate to nature is something that's really important to you.
It's very important to me. It's been important in all my books. Is it important to you? Do you like to play outside? Do you like? Well, you obviously like to walk and climb hills and mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always feel different when I'm outside. I'm just happier. What about you? Do you find it happier?
Yeah.
Happier when
Yeah. So the last question is, can you give us 3 top tips for writing books?
Oh, just 3. Well, my first, this is a bit of a funny answer, but I'd say it's about reading. Like, if you're going to write stories, you need to read stories and know about stories. And the more you read and the different kinds of things you read, it kind of feeds into the writing bit of you. And so you kind of begin to know the shape of a story and the structure of the story and how to tell it, the sense of a beginning and a middle and an end. So I'd say my first tip would be read. My second one would be buy yourself or get given a wonderful big notebook I always have plain pages where you can write and draw and kind of experiment and play and make little pictures. And that's how stories begin to come, I think. So in little fragments, so images, words, ideas. So I'd say have a notebook which is just for you, where you can't get it wrong, where you just explore and write and get ideas for stories and come back to them and change them. So that's part of my writing process, and so I encourage you to do that. And my third one is to allow story the time it takes and not to be worried about getting it right first time. So have a go and then read it back and then make changes and be kind of prepared to do that until the story is as good as you can possibly get it. And to do it because you love it, to do it just for yourself. And then if you want to share it with somebody else, then do, but I don't think you have to. I think it's important sometimes that we keep our writing just for ourselves.
Do you girls want to write?
Yeah, maybe.
What sort of writing do you like to do?
I like doing stories and sort of stories that are based on books I've read, but with my sort of own versions.
That's fantastic. Wow. So you could maybe write a story about Cora.
Yeah.
You could write the next book where we find out a bit more about where Cora's come from and why she's all by herself and wandering in the woods. How about you?
I kind of like doing stuff that I've heard of and would like to do that and then make up my own characters. I also like doing comics.
That's a great idea. So yes, because you like reading graphic novels, don't you? So writing your own comics, that's a brilliant idea. Oh, I'd like to see them.
And perhaps, Julie, you could tell us how you became a writer in the first place. I mean, what can they expect if they want to become writers?
It's quite a long journey for me. So I wrote always as a child, when I was your sort of age, I was always writing stories, and I would sometimes make them into little books and illustrate them and give them a title. And I mentioned my friend Linda earlier. Her mum had a typewriter. We didn't have one in our house, and she typed up one of my stories and made it into a little book with a cover, and I've still got that, and it's very precious to me. So I was about 9, I think, when she did that. So I kept writing and writing and writing, but I didn't really think about writing as a job or something I might do or get, that I would get published until I was much older. And then after I'd been to university and I trained to be a teacher, I thought, oh, there's something missing in my life. I want to be, and I was reading lots and teaching about books, teaching literature. I thought I want to be writing. So I that's when I first got my notebook and started writing stories. And I didn't take it seriously enough, really, for a very long time. But eventually I did. And I sent a story to a competition and I won it. And that made me believe that I could do it. And I had my prize given to me by Iris Murdoch, who was a very famous, well-known writer for adults. And she said to me, it was a short story, she said to me, write a novel next. So I thought, okay, I will. So I did. Anyway, long story, but eventually I got a literary agent, and then I got my first publisher, who were Puffin Books, and they published my first book, which was for teenagers, which was called Blue Moon. But it was many, many years before I was a published writer. But I always loved it. I've always loved writing. I think that's the main thing. But yes, to be prepared to work really, really hard, and and to realize that sometimes things don't happen easily. But if you really want to do something, you just keep on doing it.
And there are lots of nice writing competitions and things that you can enter. There's one which I think is still open at the moment, is the Henrietta Branford writing competition. You can find, and the BBC run the 500 words one as well, don't they? And there's all sorts of things you can try if you'd really like to read. So this has been an absolutely lovely discussion. Girls, if I were to put you on the spot, what would you say to somebody about reading Ettie and the Midnight Pool? If you wanted to encourage one of your friends at school to read it, what would you say?
If you like mysteries, then this is the book for you. That it's sort of a book that will hook you to the end, and it will leave you wanting more, and sort of leaving you to think about it and really ponder over the characters, the story, the setting, and how it all can link together.
That's fabulous, isn't it, Julia?
Fantastic to hear. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I can add my sixpenny worth as well, because I've just been able to review it for Love Reading, so you'll be able to see how much I love it when it's published on the review. So make sure you all rush out to the shops on June the 6th to get your copy of Ettie and the Midnight Pool by Julia Green, published by David Fickling. It's a wonderful read, and we've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to talk to you, and your questions were fabulous. So thank you so much, and keep reading and keep writing. I look forward to reading some of your work one day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.